Michelle. I am your curly-haired best friend. Welcome to my channel, and this is your Curl University. If you're on a journey to have the best hair of your life and maximize your curls, like and subscribe. Whether you are new to the curly hair space or you've been hanging around here for a while, you may have heard some of your favorite creators talk about hair porosity. Hair porosity is your hair strand's ability to absorb and retain moisture. It sounds really complicated when you first get started, but I'm gonna break it down and make it really simple for you, and here's why you should care about it. Curly hair is often naturally on the drier side, and we're constantly trying to figure out how to make sure we're keeping it moisturized and hydrated. Understanding your hair porosity helps you understand the best ways and products to make sure that your hair strands are able to absorb the moisture that you're giving it, and more importantly, hold on to that moisture, so that your curls look amazing not just when you first get out of the shower, but for 5 to 7 days after your wash day. So how do we measure our hair porosity then? It's a spectrum. There's low porosity at one end, normal porosity in the middle, and high porosity at the other end. Your hair strands are covered in these small cuticles that are windows that allow your hair to accept and expel water or moisture from the hair strand itself. When looking at a low porosity hair strand, those cuticles are pretty closed off. Those doors are shut, and it looks more like snake skin, kind of more smooth and small bumps along the hair strand, meaning it's difficult for the hair to get saturated because water is having a hard time getting into the hair strand. But also, once there's moisture in that hair strand, it does not relinquish it easily. Remember, that door is mostly closed. On the other end of the spectrum, we have high porosity hair, and now if we can picture those doors being wide open, it's gonna look more like a Christmas tree. All of those cuticles are allowing moisture in and out, passing through much more easily. From a practical standpoint, that means high porosity hair is getting saturated really quickly, but it's also having a hard time holding on to that moisture, so it often ends up getting dry very quickly. Normal hair is gonna be in the middle of that. It's going to take a moderate amount of time to get saturated and wet, but on the other hand, it's gonna be pretty good at holding on to moisture. If you want to know what your hair porosity is, you can scroll forward to this time, and there will be a couple of porosity tests that you can do to try and figure out what your own hair porosity is. What are the characteristics of different hair porosities? Let's start with low porosity hair. If you have low porosity hair and you're trying to air dry with no product, it's gonna take 8 hours or more for your hair to get to the point where it's bone dry. Diffusing your hair might easily take 45 minutes up to 2 hours. Likewise, because those hair strands have cuticles that are more closed, it can be really difficult for products and moisture to penetrate those hair strands, so you can end up with a lot of product buildup on top of the hair strands. People with low porosity hair end up having to typically clarify quite often to deal with that product buildup, and often co-washing just won't cut it because there's so much moisture that often isn't actually penetrating the strand. You need to get rid of that buildup on a regular basis with some sort of shampoo that contains surfactants. In general, low porosity hair likes those lighter, milkier products that will have an easier time getting into the hair strands. If you live in a fairly moderate climate, your hair will also really like humectants, things like glycerin and honey. Humectants absorb moisture from the environment around, so it helps your hair to continue to take on moisture throughout the day. You may have heard about the discussion of protein in the curly hair world. Protein can be great. It's part of the building blocks of keeping your hair nice and strong, but so many protein ingredients just aren't fine enough to be able to penetrate those low porosity closed off cuticles. Ingredients like this are going to be more likely to actually penetrate the low porosity strands, but often low porosity hair is quite protein sensitive. It's building up on the strands rather than helping make those strands strong, so that is something to be wary of. I used to have lower porosity hair than I do now, and when I did, I was very careful. I used very little protein, maybe a protein treatment every 6 weeks. I didn't have it in my regular conditioner or my deep conditioner, and I was careful to choose styling products that had less protein in them. Since your hair can struggle to retain moisture, again, we've talked about those closed off cuticles, it can be helpful to use something like heat when doing a deep conditioner to help the cuticles open up a little bit and absorb more of that moisture. So for that reason, I really recommend using a heat cap when deep conditioning if you have low porosity hair. Water-soluble and lighter products are going to prevent buildup on your hair and make sure that the moisture is actually getting into those strands. Some of the lighter oils like argan oil or grapeseed oil can be great oils to choose, or ingredients in your curly hair products, or milkier spray-on leave-in conditioners, things like that. On the other side, we have high porosity hair. High porosity hair gets saturated really quickly, gets wet really quickly, but also dries very fast and tends to get tangled easily and ends up looking dry or dull quickly after having added moisturizing products. High porosity hair can be caused by genetics, but it can also happen because you've permed your hair, used relaxers, or even dyed your hair, bleached, anything like that. Even heat damage can contribute to high porosity hair. Because those cuticles are so wide open, it's really not prone to product buildup in the same way. Basically, shampoos that say sodium lauryl sulfate on them, not really for you. It's gonna be too harsh for high porosity hair. Co-washing might cut it a lot of the time. Of course, even high porosity hair should be clarifying at least once or twice a month. But I would recommend investing in a more gentle clarifying shampoo. For pretty much all of your other products, you want heavier, creamier, denser butters and oils, things like that, that are going to easily saturate those strands, but are gonna hold on to those strands and stick around for a little bit longer than some of the milkier, lighter products. The theme here is dense, nutrient-rich products that your hair is going to love, and heavier oils like Jamaican black castor oil, avocado oil, or even olive oil. Now, I know this is controversial, but if you have extremely high porosity hair and you struggle to retain moisture and it's just getting super dried out really, really quickly, you might actually like introducing a silicone towards the end of your curly hair routine. I know it's a taboo topic in the curly world, but silicone acts like a hydrophobic layer on your hair strand. So it stops water from passing in and out, and that means any moisture that you've added before you add that silicone is gonna stick around on your hair longer. High porosity hair is more prone to breakage, and as part of that, you know how those cuticles are wide open? Protein, those building blocks to your hair, is going to be great for high porosity hair. It helps fill in those cuticles and prevent the breakage that your hair is prone to. It'll keep your hair nice and strong. You can experiment with having protein ingredients like these in your styling products, in your conditioner, in your deep conditioner, and find a blend that works well for your hair. Silicone is particularly nice for high porosity hair that is prone to hydro fatigue or generally getting over moisturized. In general, high porosity hair doesn't hold styles as easily, so you might be leaning towards stronger hold products, and it does dry extremely quickly and is prone to breakage. And as a result, I generally recommend, if you're diffusing your hair, to do it on a lower heat setting, and plopping and air drying might actually work well with your hair. You're kind of working with the fact that it dries so quickly anyways. All that being said, how do you figure out what your hair porosity is? This is the million-dollar question. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. The only way you can test 100% is to send your hair to a lab and have them look at the strands under a microscope and tell you whether you have lower or higher porosity hair. Given everything that we know about low and high porosity hair, we can do a couple of tests and then use our good judgment based on the results that we see to make an educated guess about our hair porosity. One test is called the bowl method. You take a clean, clarified hair strand that's dry and you put it in a bowl of water. If after 10 minutes it's still floating on top of the water, that could be an indicator that you have low porosity hair. If within 10 minutes it sinks to the very bottom, that could be an indicator that you have high porosity hair. And if it floats somewhere in the middle, then that could be an indicator that you have normal porosity hair. Next, we have the spray test. On clean, clarified, dry hair, spray it with water. If after 10 or 15 minutes, those little globules of water still haven't diffused into the shaft and it's just kind of sitting on top, but your strands are still dry, this could be an indicator that you have low porosity hair. If you spray and within kind of 5 or 10 minutes, your hair is now just wet and there aren't those little water droplets all over it, that could be an indicator of higher porosity hair. We also have the strand test. You can just get a hair strand and put it between your finger and thumb and rub your finger in both directions along the strand. If you feel tiny little bumps as you go along, that could be an indicator of higher porosity hair, versus if it feels more hard and dense and doesn't really have bumps when you run your finger along it, that could be an indicator of lower porosity hair. Finally, we have what I call the dry time test. Hair that has no product in it, that has been clarified and takes less than 4 hours to air dry, it's a strong indication that you likely have high porosity hair. If your hair is taking 8 hours or more to dry, it's a strong indicator that you have lower porosity hair. And if it's falling between those 4 to 8 hours, there's a good chance that your hair is falling somewhere in the normal porosity range. Now, it goes without saying there are a million factors that can skew the results to these tests. So it could be that you're getting really varied responses in all of the different tests, or that you're getting false positives on these tests. So the other important thing is to keep in mind everything we've talked about so far and what you know about hair porosity. If treating your hair like high porosity hair, using those heavier butters, making sure that you use low heat on your hair because it's prone to breakage, your hair loves protein, these things all point to having high porosity hair. So then if your hair just floats on the surface in the float test, it's probably not telling you you have low porosity hair. Rather, it's probably just telling you you have buildup or hair oil on your hair. I wish I could give you a more cut and dry answer for what your hair porosity is, but I hope I've given you enough information here for you to be able to make an educated guess about your own hair porosity, and that will help you choose products and techniques moving forward that are best suited for your curly hair. Try some of these porosity tests on your own hair and let me know in the comments what the results are. Are you conclusively high or low porosity? Do you think you might fall somewhere in the middle? Or did you just get some crazy responses to the different tests? I want to know all about it. Let me know in the comments.